Okay, I did a video earlier, basically talking about why the police are basically getting away with killing people, um, no consequences whatsoever. This kind of ties into that. It kind of goes into a little bit more detail from what I know about a delegation of authority order. Basically, delegation of authority order is a proper document. It's paper, and it basically outlines um, a chain of power, a chain of command. What it does is, let's say, this a Supreme Court justice, or actually the entire all of them, um, would sign this document, and basically they're delegating the authority as the Supreme Court to a lower court. Lower court. So what that means is, without that document, legally speaking, that court has no authority or power. They are a de facto court, or I'm not sure the exact terminology, but basically they are not a proper legal court. There's some kind of they technically become fall under that corporate entity we were talking about earlier. So when this deals with police, I can only tell you what I've seen, what I have looked up. I'm sure somebody who's more familiar with this could probably fill you in more. Or again, always look at this stuff yourself, look it up, do some research. But whenever in regards to police, I believe simply the chief of police isn't enough to issue delegations of authority orders to their officers. From my understanding, um, it has to come from the governor or the president of the United States. So, you know, some some of these are on record, and again, like when you're trying to battle this in court, um, if the judge even allows you to get it this far, um, a lot of the time there is some kind of record of it. But what you need to do is what you would have to do is challenge them on the technicality that when you ask them for it on at the time of the incident, they were unable to produce it. What does that mean? That means you have an ID. You have an ID. You carry this as identification. Um, the police have to have that paper, that document, that delegation of authority order, because the badge, the gun, the uniform, the patrol car are not um, are not a legal document. They're not. They're they obviously represent the police. That's what they're supposed to be. But legally speaking, without that paper, they're nobody. They're just a regular person. They're a security guard. So um, another way to think about it is, let's say back in like the Middle Ages or something. Like let's say Robin Hood somewhere in England, Sherwood Forest, something, and you have like the sheriff, right? The Sheriff of Nottingham. He got that position, that title from the king, and that king writes up the delegation of authority order, and he gives it to this person that he gave this position to, and that when he goes out into the town or the city or whatever, and he needs to arrest somebody or do whatever he has to do, nobody's gonna listen to him unless he can produce the documents. So that's, legally speaking, that's everything. That's everything. If you do not have the documentation, if you do not have the paperwork, if nothing's on the record or on file, then it doesn't exist. Um, so that's part of why when you get like a traffic stop or any interaction with the police, they always ask for your ID. They want your ID. They want to see who you are, what your status is. That's the biggest thing. Um, you know, and I consider myself a newbie on this subject. So, um, you know, your state ID, your birth certificate, your social security card, all that stuff is BS, really. It's all that does is prove that you're property of the state, of the corporation. And I mean, you could look all this stuff up, and I'm not going to go into details of why specifically, but the gist is, you know, um, without these papers, these documents, you know, the police are not police. So, how many of them actually get a delegation of authority order? That's debatable. I could argue that most don't have them ever, a proper one. Um, uh, when it comes to any of them that may have them, you're what you're probably looking at is basically technically a forged document, because the person issuing it probably doesn't have the authority to. They themselves probably don't even have a delegation of authority to issue a delegation of authority. So, in regards to, let's say, the president, you know, he has an enormous amount of authority to delegate to others, and you know, his cabinet members, whatnot, need this delegation of authority order. Any of the various departments, agencies, you know, all those agents, FBI agents, CIA, NSA, everybody has to have a delegation of authority order. If they do not, and I'm talking about even, you know, some lowly office clerk, your janitor, everybody has to have a delegation of authority order that is involved with that particular agency, civilian contractors included. Without it, I mean, they are operating outside of law. So, um, it's very important that people understand this stuff. Like, you know, your entire life, you're assuming that the police and various levels of government have authority over you, when really they don't. They don't. You know, there's certain territories or jurisdictions and whatnot that have, you know, these special statuses, and in which the law actually makes sense there, and you know, they do things properly. But you know, in a little town or a little city somewhere, I mean, they're going to be incorporated, and their police force is going to be a part of that corporation. And I mean, it is what it is, and you're not going to see. They're not going to be able to produce a delegation of authority order because it doesn't exist for them, because they operate on a different set of laws. They are not. When you look at the law, look at various laws, and you just, I mean, you could walk into a law library, and basically what you're going to see is thousands and thousands of books of laws and court cases, and it's off the charts. It's so ridiculous, so complicated, so complex. It's no average person is going to know what the hell's going on. Lawyers have problems knowing, you know, what's been changed on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis. Senators, congressmen, even judges don't even know half the time. I mean, how could you? I mean, they change stuff so often that it's impossible to keep up, and that's why they have a whole bunch of paralegals and, you know, small lawyers and, you know, all these other people to try and figure out what's going on. And that's part of the problem. Like when you go to court, let's say you have a little bit of knowledge, you look some stuff up, and then you want to drop, you know, who somebody versus whoever, and or you pull out U.S. code, blah 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 blah. The judge isn't necessarily going to know that, and they are not necessarily obligated to look it up and say, "Yep, you're right. You're right. Case dismissed." They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. And if you look up instances where people do challenge the authority of the court, the government, police, and stuff like that, the most interesting thing about it is you just see this terror in their eyes. They are terrified that this person knows too much. And I don't want to get into like conspiracy stuff too much. I mean, it's documented fact. I mean, you can go on YouTube and look around at something like sovereign citizen in court or Moors in court and stuff like that. And you just look around, just watch the faces of the judge, watch their mannerisms, their tone, just look at how uncomfortable everyone is. But also, like, the biggest problem is, even if you have all the facts, you did your research and you printed out this law that says, whatever it is that could actually help you get off. The problem is that this judge doesn't necessarily have to honor that. Is it illegal? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's illegal. If the judge goes against what the law says, it's illegal. But unfortunately, the United States, from the bottom to the top, is so corrupt and so out of proportion to what it was designed to be that, I mean, there's almost no accountability. I mean, how often do you hear about judges, police officers, members of Congress, or even presidents going to jail? Never. I mean, it doesn't happen. It's so rare that when it does happen, it's a scandal for a week or something, and then conveniently it's pushed aside. So while I'm sharing this, I don't want to be pessimistic, but there's no guarantee that'll necessarily work. I've even seen some things that it's so ridiculous, like this one guy was in court and he was basically saying he doesn't want a lawyer, and the judge went ahead and said, did these series of questions trying to entrap him. And she asked him what his job was, his background or whatever, and kept asking all these little trick questions. Basically, at the end of the line of questioning, she's like, okay, so you don't have a job, you don't have money for a lawyer, right? You're not a certified lawyer. You don't have anybody that is a certified lawyer present in court. So what you're saying is you're incapable of your own defense. And she just basically derailed this guy's natural human right to decline counsel, and had a public defender come in as his defense. He said, I do not want, or he was talking to the public defender next to him, or in regards to the judge, this man does not represent me. I do not want him to represent me, for the record. Like, he's saying it on the record, and still all this happens. So there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that the judge will honor your requests. The thing is, when you see this level of corruption, the biggest thing is, you go to the root of it. You find out America's a corporation. Okay, so everything's a business, everything's about money. You start thinking like that, and then you wonder, well, what could I do to protect myself? Well, obviously, you can get a gun, but the, I mean, you're your own country. You're a natural person. You're a sovereign. You're a king or queen technically by birth. So you have a right to defend yourself. But you're going against heavily armed and trained and very well funded folks who don't necessarily know the law or care to know the law. And with the trend that we see today, random guy in the street with a gun on his hip isn't, what is he gonna do? I mean, the whoever decides to go against him for whatever reason, legal or not, justified or not, that guy's done. So, but you can do that. Combine that with reading up on the law, try to figure out some kind of means to defend yourself. But again, I mean, they constantly change the rules. There's no guarantee that there's anything you can do at this point. I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, we're in the twilight zone right now. It's that bad. I mean, this is like Orwell times 10. V for Vendetta, 1984. I mean, all kinds of different. The Matrix, you name it. I mean, it's pretty much happening right now, and there's plenty of people talking about it. There's plenty of journalists, plenty of actors, other celebrities, regular people. The thing is that most people are still kind of, they're in this state of blissful ignorance. They watch their basketball housewives and just really irrelevant stupid shit that has nothing to do with life, that has no redeemable value. It does nothing for you. It's not even entertaining at all, in my opinion. Maybe that's just because I have a brain, but most people that I've spoken to or interact with anyway, they have some sense of what's going on. But generally speaking, I think most people are in this thing. They kind of see from afar like what's happening, but they don't quite. It hasn't hit home as being real yet. They don't think it could happen to them. And I can attest to that personally. Like, when the Ferguson incident started, I was watching the news and the live streams and just seeing how crazy it was getting. The police were firing tear gas and rubber bullets and just fucking people up for no reason. I mean, these are peaceful protesters. They're mad that the police, shot an unarmed man. You can debate the details of whether it's justified or not, but the point was the community was upset and not happy with their police, and they exercised their natural right to protest. And the police, they went ham. they went ham, and the world saw it. But what's interesting, kind of ties into what I was saying before. None of the police officers or police chiefs or anyone involved with that ridiculous amount of force has been prosecuted. That should tell you something. The federal government hasn't come down and said, hey, we're going to arrest chief whoever and captain this and what. They haven't done that because, like I said before, the police are an extension or an agent of the corporation, and the people, the citizens that are protesting, are property of the corporation, and that corporation decides that it's not in their best interest to lock up their police. So What are they going to do? They do nothing. So, kind of long drawn out tangent almost. But, I'm sitting here watching the protests and the ridiculous police actions, through my computer screens. And, I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on and see, I've got, multiple screens and, computers and tablets and I love my technology. And I'm looking at all this information and it's like overload, but it's not real. It's not the same. And I said, what is it? What can I contribute to getting the truth out? Like, what can I do? And I figured, the best way to do that is to go there. And, contacted my agency, sickchirps.com, and